Yippee-i-yo.
Yippee-i-yo. Here we are over the Money Fence number 2.
Great name.
It's great. And I'll tell you what, already, if you haven't listened to the first one, tune in. But so many people have, because the feedback has been incredible, hasn't it, Tidy?
Like seriously, I'd never talk finance with girlfriends.
Yeah.
Never. It'd be like the last topic. It'd be 50 topics and 51 would be talking something to do with finance. Also, as we have brought up previously, talking finance back in the olden days, which is yesterday, was taboo, right? So therefore, the world's changed, thank God, in that sense.
Yeah. It seems to be like the hot topic at the moment, certainly amongst sort of like our friends, our listeners, and people who we didn't even know, and they didn't even know themselves that they would be so interested in it, and that finance is fun. So, we're certainly having fun.
It's also age group too, I think.
Yeah, a lot of our age group, and then also some of our children. So it sort of varies, the whole thing. It's pretty broad, but I agree a lot with our age group, and so a lot of people have been very impressed with Roger, and we are actually having an event coming up on the 19th of June, and you'll actually, if you want to come and actually hear Roger speak, meet him, there's a great opportunity. So it's going to be a lot of fun, isn't it?
Yeah, like there's a variety of speakers and a variety of subjects, and I think, as you just said then, it's very relative, very topical, and it's not going to be like, figures. It'll be just a general chit-chat about why we need to have the conversation.
Exactly.
Literally. And that's why we're doing this today.
And Roger certainly makes money fun. And so let me now welcome everybody to Over the Money Fence, this podcast that aims to help you take control of finances with clarity and confidence. Like you said, that is what we're about.
Really?
Yeah. Woo. Today we're talking about something that hits home. Being, women in your 50s, 60s, and really feeling caught in the middle. We're known as the sandwich generation. So,
it's interesting. We'll bring that up today.
Yeah,
I find that fascinating.
It is. It's true.
I love a good sandwich.
Your mum used to. Di's one of 8. Her mum used to make piles of them.
She didn't she?
What did you like in your sandwiches?
What's that? Chicken.
What was your favourite sandwich?
Chicken and salad.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah,
Chicken.
yeah.
You still like
chicken
salad.
And do you want to know something interesting,
mayonnaise?
Roger? Because he'll love this. Dad went to boarding. My father went to boarding school from he was 8 years old.
Wow.
And my father was very successful, and Mum would put out this incredible don't you love how we digress? This beautiful Sunday feast, because we're all about family. But my dad would be it makes me want to cry. He'd be in the kitchen, and he'd have a piece of white bread with tomato sauce on it.
That was his sandwich.
And that was it was satiating, it was nurturing, it was nourishment. Yeah,
Happy memories.
I know.
Did you put twisties in it as well? Like the
but you know what? It wasn't maybe happy memories, because that's very lonely, sad times.
True.
But that was his nourishment.
Okay.
Yeah, so sorry, I always digress.
And I'm sure he had a favourite sauce too. There'd be a favourite brand.
Probably.
Yeah.
Probably. But Mum would go, "Oh, Bob, what are you doing?" And he's like, and then he'd go and have a roast lamb. Okay, so like lots of you out there, I've been through it, so I totally can empathise. You're caring for elderly parents, and look, we're going to run through the guilt factor with adult kids and managing life after divorce and looking at how to protect your own financial future. And it's going to be we'll cover both emotionally and financially, which is so relative. But look, honestly, today, like we will each month, we have the gorgeous Roger Montgomery, who we both adore.
We so do.
And look, to give him some kudos, because we do have fun with him, and he does remind us of Tom Cruise, but that's irrelevant.
I'm not allowed to say that, Di.
But I'm going to ground him, honestly. He's the founder and chairman of Montgomery Investment Management. And ultimately, he's just going to be helping us to understand what's changed and why it feels so hard right now investing your damn hard-earned money, and I can relate. So really, all we want to do is we want to thrive, not just survive. So welcome on board again.
Yeah.
Roger.
Thank you very much. Thanks for having me.
Yeah.
We are thrilled to have you back here.
I promise you I don't feel like Tom Cruise. And and for those who haven't seen the YouTube videos, I don't look like him either.
Well, I believe that you're launching a new movie at the moment.
The only thing is, though, I found out this morning he's 62.
Yes.
You're a lot younger than that.
Yes, I'm
But still, it's a compliment.
almost 10 years younger.
That's how I knew he'd emphasise that.
Yes.
I'll have you know,
He'll
I'm even
generate.
better than
He'll
Tom Cruise.
he'll overtake Tom Cruise's wealth. He's got 10 more years to do it. So
let's
now,
learn some wonderful things.
So talking about what you're sort of saying, the sandwich generation. I mean, your dad, that does move me with the tomato sauce. I mean, really. But Roger, so we've had listeners and a lot of women. They keep telling us that they're really feeling stretched, and because most of the women are really the ones that are, they're looking after your elderly parents there, and it's often sort of goes on the daughters, and then you're helping your adult children, which you always want to do. But why is this pressure sort of falling so heavily on women, and really what does it mean financially? And what issues are we sort of facing, really?
There's a lot to unpack there.
It is.
Yeah.
I've said this before, my dad died when I was 2, and Mum raised my brother and I by herself, and she never remarried. She was only 24 when he died, and he was 50 when he died. So there was a big age gap between them. He'd gone for the hot model from Eastern Europe, and he left her with 2 sons. And she really became the primary caregiver, and that's what the sandwich generation is, right? It's women in their 50s and 60s who are caught between looking after their parents and also looking after their adult children. And there's a number of reasons for that. One of them is, there's a natural inclination to be a caregiver. Women, the responsibility of caring falls more on women than it does on men. And if you look at the statistics, there's a disproportionately larger number of women who are in that role than there are men. And that's not to say that men don't want to, but they've often been the hunter-gatherers. They're trying to support the women who are doing that and performing that role. So the issue that you've got is that historically, there's just conventional gender roles that women have fallen into or been put in. And I'm not qualified to actually explain why that's the case, but that just is what it is. And then there's that division of labour. So, women have been forced to leave the workforce to have babies, to look after young children. And sure, women are entitled to have it all, but the physical inescapability of having a child falls only on women.
That's
right?
a fact.
Giving birth is a woman's responsibility. And so that takes them out of the workforce. And then for some women, and I can only speak for the women that I've met who've told me this, but for some women, they wanted to go straight back into the workforce, and then when they had their child, they couldn't. They didn't want to anymore. That sudden, how do I describe it? It's that sudden appreciation and realisation of just love. This
the maternal instinct.
It's a
sometimes
massive
too,
transition
isn't it?
too.
It really is.
Here's this baby that didn't deserve it, didn't earn it, didn't work for it, but you will stand in front of a bullet for them when they're born, right? You will sacrifice your own life for them. That is unconditional love, and you don't really experience that. Let me say this: a lot of women experience it the first time when they have a child, and that changes things. And for a lot of women, historically, it's meant that they've taken a career break. So they've reduced the hours that they're working, which means they're earning less. Less is being contributed to super, so there's a big gap between what men and women have in their super fund. And that's partly historical, it's partly convention, and you might want to, rile against it, but that's happened. And the other thing is that women not only bear the heavier responsibility in terms of caregiving, but as I just mentioned a moment ago, their lifetime earnings are a lot lower. And then when they get divorced or separated or their partner passes away, then, suddenly there's more stress. And the reality is that, and we talked about this in a previous episode, but, the stress of money is a real one. It's one that can have physical, not just psychological consequences, but physiological consequences as well. So then there are health issues to deal with. And then, of course, you've got this issue where, and I don't understand this, and forgive me, and the men are going to hate me for saying this, but some men have just been assholes to the women that have loved them and cared for them, and when they separate, they go for a lot more than they probably should, they're not fair. The separation isn't equitable, and then on top of that, the requirement to support women and kids after divorce is really hard to enforce. So women, there are a lot of women who are trying to make do with a lot less as a consequence of the men that were in their lives not supporting them after separation. And so for all of these reasons, women are in a really difficult position. And so what we want to try and do today is come up with some really simple, patient solutions and offer some suggestions that are going to liberate the women who find themselves in these positions through no fault of their own, but because they're women.
Oh, bravo, because,
Wow, I'm just
everyone
digesting
can
all of
relate
that.
to that. Nearly everybody can speak to, even when I was flying with the airlines too, and, I stopped to have, my children, my babies, and I was lucky. I did start with the super, when I started, we did that in the late 80s, so I'm fortunate for that. But, at that stage too, when I stopped to have maternity leave, I didn't have any money coming in. There was, you just kind of leave without pay, I guess, and so no money was also then going into my super. And so it's just sort of then all of a sudden financially, and so it's only really years later when your marriage is over and you're a different situation. When you're younger, I didn't even think about it then.
No,
of course not.
And all of a sudden now I go, things could have been different.
And Nicola, the other big thing that's happening is there's going to be this massive transfer of wealth from the generation before who sadly are now passing away, and that's accelerating. And consequently, there's going to be money that's going to be transferred to the kids who are in their 50s and 60s now and 70s now. And it doesn't matter how much money is coming, the fights that I've heard about within families, it doesn't matter whether we're talking about $1 billion or $100,000, but, there are families that I'm aware of who are having arguments over money before the parents have even passed away. And the parents are finding it incredibly frustrating and incredibly offensive that the kids are now arguing over what they're going to get before the parents have even passed on.
Can I tell you a little story?
Sure.
Very quick, and I won't say where it was, but my mum and dad were wanting to buy this house where we lived at that stage, and I'll cut it really, really short. And mum would drop cakes off, and she loved the woman that owned the house, but it was another property she owned, I might add, and she really got to love my mum and dad, who had 8 children. And cut a long story short, Dad got a call at 3 o'clock one afternoon, and it was from her. She was dying, and I've got goosebumps everywhere, and all around her bed were her kids arguing about money. Think about that for a second.
Yeah.
Think about, listeners, I want you to think about or try and create that image in your mind.
Yeah.
They were arguing about money while their mother is dying, okay?
Sad,
so
isn't
this
it?
is a real story. I mean, you've heard it time and time again with your experience in the financial world, investing
We
world.
see it. You've
seen it? At 4 o'clock, Mum and Dad
And so
exchanged on the property.
Yeah, let me say, Di, I'm glad you brought that
She
up.
gave it,
Yeah.
while they were all arguing, she rang Dad and went, can you get to your lawyer? I need da-da-da-da. Dad had seen the contract.
Yeah.
It was exchanged that afternoon while they were still all bickering.
Yeah. But we need to talk
And no
about
money
that now,
went to
don't
them.
we?
We
So
do.
That's what I'm
We
glad
do,
you're
Nick.
bringing
So
this up.
there's
So
I guess there's a
So true.
Well,
there's
we're
a
alive.
preparatory element. There's a preparatory element. You need to be
Well
prepared.
said.
You want to have.
Yeah.
You want to understand money, have some confidence about it, understand, as we've said before, you can be patient about this, because for some people there is going to be a transfer of wealth. They're going to experience that, and they're going to need to know how to deal with that in a sensible and rational way. So let's try and prepare people for that as well.
What about the guilt factor, for example? You want to be generous. You truly do. That's instinctive. Also in a woman, hello,
Yeah.
generosity and nurturing and all of that. But, how can, with time and money and everything else, it's so frustrating. Like, so many people are so guilty at the moment about
Well, you want to help
how
kids.
to do it.
How do you help your adult kids?
Yes.
But it's interesting, there are people who we know who are clients of ours who are extremely wealthy, and they've become wealthy because they grew up poor. And that was, for them, and this is not true for everyone, but that was a real incentive to work hard, and it was a real incentive to be a success. They became successful, and now they want their kids to experience everything they didn't experience when they were that age. So they want to give their kids a lot. And it's understandable that you want to help, but it's also helping your kids by teaching them to be resilient. You want to give your kids enough so they have some choices, but you don't want to give them so much that they don't have to choose. That's too much, right? And so there are some sensible options that we can talk about. For example, I really like the idea of, if you're in a position where you have enough money to be able to help your kids as much as you want, probably the most important thing that you can do, and probably a rational thing to do in my estimation, and this is not, none of this is advice, by the way, it's just a suggestion. But if
It's backed by your experience, don't forget.
If you can give them enough for a modest house, particularly when they're growing their families and they've got work pressures, if you can take the pressure of owning and saving for a home off them, then that's probably a really sensible. And by the way, I mean a modest house, not a house that they can sell and then they never have to work again.
Yes.
Just a modest house. That's probably enough. In my opinion, you want to teach your kids to be resilient, and you don't want to give them so much money that they, don't have to make any decisions again in their lives. Warren Buffett once said, and Warren Buffett's this, amazing mentor when it comes to sensible approaches to money. And he said, you want to give your kids enough money that they can do anything, but not so much money that they can do nothing.
Oh, okay,
Right?
love that.
Really pithy thing to remember.
Love that.
And it's a good thing now, how I was just saying how a lot of us, we didn't talk about money. And so, one way then, the kids didn't hear about them talking about money, and then all of a sudden then inheritance, all these things are coming up, and then there are arguments, sadly, on the deathbed or those things there. So maybe by bringing it up now and talking about it, and are there good ways of doing that?
Is it a living will?
Yeah, to do that, while we are alive, so you brought that up, and it's just a really important thing that women are talking about it now.
So what I'm doing more and more with my kids, so I have 2 adult sons. They both live overseas. They're both living and working internationally, and I have a daughter who's still at school and still at home with us. But I am, and it's really interesting about this, but I'm very, very open to the idea of having conversations about what's going to happen next with them now. And to do that.
How old's your daughter?
So my daughter's 15. She's 16 tomorrow.
Wow.
She's sweet 16
on.
tomorrow.
Bless.
And so, my family, we get together, we're trying to get together more often, so they fly back to Australia when they can. And it's usually at pivotal moments in their lives. So one son's about to travel overseas to Europe, and we talked about extreme sports.
Yes.
He does one of the most extreme sports in the world. Wingsuiting
So does Tom
base
Cruise.
jumping.
Yes, I know.
Yeah, so
Can't wait to see him in the
so
latest
before,
movie.
so he's coming home, and we want to see him before he goes and does these incredibly dangerous adventures. But we will be having conversations casually.
Okay, give me an example. How do you start? Okay, how do you start a conversation with a family?
So I just want
We have this much money. You're going to get this much. No, you're not going to get it. You get they're like, Dad, I'm out of here.
Yeah,
This
I
is
talk
boring.
more casually than that.
How do you give me an example of how you initiate
everyone
it?
will want to do it a different way,
Yeah.
and so I'm not speaking for everyone. I'm just speaking for me.
That's what I love.
But my and it's really interesting, Kerry, and I've talked about Kerry, and I hope she doesn't mind me saying this, but when I raise the subject of money, she brings all of her history and of all of her biases to that conversation, which I have to consider as well and do this in a really sensitive way. But I'd be more casual. We don't sit down and formalise it.
No.
It's a conversation. We're just having dinner, and I'll just say, at some point, I really want to talk about what we've got and what we intend to do with it, and I want to know what you think about that.
Oh, I love that. Put it over to them.
It's such a great way of just. It's also then taking the whole thing. It's educating everyone there, and it's making now there's not this taboo thing. It's
so
healthy
true.
to
It's
talk about
normalising
money.
it.
So
I love that.
I don't
the
want
reality
my kids,
of life.
When I kick the bucket, I don't, and I'm 54. So I hope I don't kick the
Maybe.
bucket. One of my sons is really into longevity, and he's like, "Oh, Dad, you're going to be 120, 140." And I'm thinking,
Oh, I love
"You got
that.
rocks in your head." But anyway,
You never know. Dare to die.
Yeah, he thinks the technology-
But Tom Cruise is 60. He's looking good.
Exactly.
yeah. So
62.
so one of the things
Not
that
as good
we
as Roger.
gosh, stop it,
I
please.
love you, lover.
I'm not coming back.
See how we make finance fun.
I'm not. I tell the girls before I rock up here to the studio, I go,
Sorry, we're just human.
it's
And
the only
just
time my
feedback we
palms
can
It's
get
just
sweat.
a girl in front of a boy.
Yeah, exactly.
My wife won't let me come back.
She
Keep
will.
going.
We love
No,
her.
we
We
love
love
Kerry,
her.
and we can't wait
We
to
love
see.
her.
Kerry's coming to our talk.
Oh, no,
She bloody well is.
She will run a mile.
Dude, no.
will
She's
run a
part of
mile.
our clan.
No,
Not
she-
So
Kerry,
we're
Kerry, Kerry.
digressing. Back to the conversation with the family.
Anyway,
Yeah.
I don't want them to have the scenario that you described where they're fighting
Yeah.
around the deathbed.
Yeah.
So I want them to all be in agreement about what's going to happen. And if you're in a fortunate position where you've got, let's say, multiple properties, you ask them about what are we going to do with that? Oh, I don't care. I'll never go back there. One of them's going to say, I'm never going to go back there. I don't really care what you do with it. The other one's like, oh, no, I really love going there, and maybe we could keep it, we could rent it out. Have these conversations now. Have these conversations while you're alive and get some agreement, or get all on, try and get it. And I can't speak for everyone because we're fortunate that at the moment, at least, and I don't know what the future holds, but there's no animosity between our children. They all
Which
get
is-
along
which
and they
is a
like
gift.
spending.
Which is good.
They like to
Sometimes-
spend time
yeah.
together, but not everyone's in that situation. So again, I can't speak for every family, but if you can get everyone on the same page before you go, well, that's a positive.
And
I think that
I
can
also
only be
think it's
constructive.
fair because when I say fair, I'm a great believer. What I do for one child, I'll always do for the other.
So-
That's a fact.
So one of the most dangerous things in a will
Yeah.
is I leave everything to my children equally.
Well, that's what my
That's-
will says.
Well, that's super dangerous.
Oh, I tell you, I learned
So
something.
we're learning something every day. Why,
every
Roger?
time I talk to Roger, I make notes and notes, and when I finish,
Well, I've got a
this
friend,
interview-
and we'll introduce him to the program later on. But
So
I've got a
can
friend.
you break that down simplistically for I know
Because you've shocked me too.
because I
thought
want to go
everything
down
just
another
goes, I've
avenue
got-
today, but we are digressing. We always do.
Yes.
But like,
Equal is not equal.
Oh.
Because some have a lot more than others, and it's not fair. And he's already got enough, and why does he get the same amount as me, and I've got nothing? And why do I get the same? Or what if the asset is a property, one property? How do you leave that equally?
Can't they sell it and just
one
split
might-
the money?
and he might get $1 million
but
more
that's
by
not
the
what's-
time I
that's
pass
not what's
away.
in the will.
Yeah. Well, I
The
haven't
will
thought
says
about
I'll just
this
leave
at
everything
all.
to my children and equally.
is making
You've
me-
only left them a property. It's not sold. How do you leave it equally? One wants to sell, one doesn't want to sell, one wants to live in it.
So how do you do
One-
that then? Because I thought
Well,
it was
that's-
obvious.
that's
we need
the
to bring in the.
Have the conversation
See,
before
it
the
all comes back to it.
have the conversation
See, talk
now.
about learning.
God, you're even
guys.
making me change my bloody will. I've
I
learned
know.
so
I didn't
much
want to
from
do
you.
that.
No,
And see,
it's
no,
vital.
I'm not giving you advice. Go and seek personal professional
I'm
advice.
being educated, and it's up to me what I choose to
But
do,
it
Roger. I
can be-
get that.
It can
But-
cause a mess. That
Yeah, okay,
simple
thank you.
desire
For
to
what?
love your kids equally
I do, no matter
doesn't
what.
always work out that way when you're gone, right? Because what's left is really hard to deal with. There's tax, there's income, there's the desire to live there. I don't have a house. I'm renting. I want to live there. How do we deal with that? It's very, very
Hey,
hard to
this
leave
is
things
riding
equally.
with some of your stories because we all know some stories, but this is a really good thing.
Oh.
Hopefully we can one
Are we
way
going
now
on time?
of
'Cause I've got
making
so
it
much
sort
to
of
get through.
easier
Oh, great.
by talking about it beforehand. But sort of just some of the other things too is that we are living longer, and
Yeah.
and so and one's because
and women do live longer
we,
than
we,
men.
That's
we
a fact.
do, which
Yeah.
we're lucky that way.
Yeah.
We outlive all the blokes.
And our lives cost a lot more with our
And we
beauty
get that's
and our
hey,
everything.
of
we
course
do.
it
Chip in, that's
does.
true. This hair doesn't sort of this
By the way-
blonde that way,
Yeah, I'm not going to say
No,
that.
go on. Yeah,
Also,
no. Was that a nah? Yeah, nah,
But
yeah.
Roger was saying, less super, you're divorced, we're living longer, and now you're thinking, I haven't got that money now to stretch out sort of going there. So it's sort of like, we've been left out of these financial sort of conversations and all of a sudden
Yes.
you're stuck here. Now, what do you do?
Okay, well, I think
Great
for most,
question.
I think for most people, seeking advice
Yeah.
is really important. And going and speaking to someone where you can confidentially divulge all of your financial personal situation, but also your concerns and what your desires are. And again, I'm speaking for people who might be in a position to have that conversation.
Yes.
And so seeking advice is the first step. Now, how do you do that?
Well, who do you go to?
Yeah.
Who do you go
Who are
to?
you going to call?
Yeah. Ghostbusters.
We're now showing our age. There is a generation
God,
of people.
Thanks, Rod.
Well, I'm sorry, but there's a generation of people listening to this podcast that have no idea what you're talking about.
Isn't that
Sam, no,
sad?
And what Di's talking about is a movie called Ghostbusters.
I love that movie. I'm going to watch that
I interviewed
movie.
every actor.
And I'm going to watch some
did
Tom
you?
Cruise
Yeah, and I had
movies.
the Ghostbusters car and the studio. Anyway, that's another story.
Okay, so-
fill me in.
Okay,
Let's
so
go.
I've always had this sort of niggling concern in the back of my mind. I've worked in this industry for 33 years. It's all I've done since I left university. And people might say, "Oh gosh, what a boring life he's led." I have some sympathy for that view, but let me say this: my niggling concern has always been, gosh, I've met lots of financial planners, and there are some really, really great ones. But how, if you haven't been in the industry, how do you find them?
I know.
So
And who do you trust? Because, who do you trust? And also, some of our other listeners, we actually had a couple write in and say too, where do you go? What do you do? And some had actually said, I just thought it's just going to cost me more money to go and
that was
see
a great
it.
question.
Is it just for
Yeah.
wealthy people to go and see a financial
Yeah.
advisor? It's just going to be another expense that I can't really afford.
Yeah.
So what do you say to that as well?
okay, so yes, there is a cost associated with it, but usually, just think about your health concerns. Think about going to see a GP or a surgeon. I had an operation on my spine because of too many high impact sports. So landing,
Tom Cruise.
Yeah.
landing skis, landing mountain bikes, all this sort of stuff. And my discs were compressed, so I had to have surgery on my spine. Now,
that's awful.
the first neurosurgeon that I saw, I just didn't feel like they were going to do a great job. They were very flippant and they were very dismissive. And so I thought, no, I need to go and see someone else. And fortunately, I think this is a bit of divine intervention, but I had a very, very dear friend who was suffering from the same symptoms, and a really great surgeon, a guy named Gordon Dandy, who's a neurosurgeon up on the North Shore
He's
at
handy.
the Sand.
Yeah. Andy Dandy.
He was referred to me, and praise God that I went and saw him, because he actually looked at my scans and he said, if you'd gone and had the operation the other neurosurgeon had recommended, he said, literally weeks later you'd be in to see me to have another operation. That wasn't your problem, So it was fortunate that I went and saw a second surgeon.
Right.
So what I'm saying is, don't take the first opinion. You see multiple people. It's going to take some time out of your life to
So
do
what
this.
are we looking for? Trust?
So
Is that number one?
You want to see some kind of sympathetic kind of
gut instinct
a relation.
your
very
there's
much so.
there's brain cells around the stomach. There are cells. So
love
scientists have discovered that there are cells not unlike brain cells
fascinating,
around
isn't
in the
it?
lining of the stomach. So when we talk about gut feel, there's perhaps more legitimacy to that idea
So
than
go
what we
by
initially
that.
thought.
If the financial advisor in your gut doesn't feel
Well,
right,
the thing is,
or it's shonky,
the thing is, you don't know what you don't know. So by seeing more advisors go, and the first time you go and see them, there's no obligation.
That's what my
It's
question
not costing
was.
you any
Is it-
money.
Thank you.
oh hey, that's
So that first meeting is
I
gonna
hope
cost you
that
nothing.
listeners,
Because
like the
she
one
wrote that one in,
because
you
that's a
know.
great one.
But we're going to come back to which
That's
ones you
it.
go and see in a minute,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
So if you don't know, if you're starting from scratch and you don't know where to go, my suggestion is, think about this. There are awards in Australia for good advisors, right? And I've got a list of them here. So there's
okay.
Can we
the
put that on
Yeah.
our show notes?
Yeah, I'd like to know.
Yeah, I can
I
give you-
want to
so-
know too.
Yeah.
But
So
just if you're on the go or driving.
So there's a group called the Independent Financial Advisors,
Yeah.
the IFA Excellence Awards. So you can Google this, and every year they provide a list where they've recognised the top businesses and the top industry professionals in Australia in that financial services industry.
Okay.
So you'll find out who's won awards for being really good at what they do. And these are peer reviewed, so these are being assessed by other advisors, and that'll be the first
Is it
port
the
of call.
Academy Awards of the financial world?
It's less
I'm loving it.
We're going to roll out the red carpet.
without offending
But this is
financial
good.
advisors.
This is reassuring.
Another one is the Financial Advice Association of Australia, the FAAA, and they again they award and recognise members who have given the best quality advice. This is a really independent, legitimate way of finding advisors. Because it might be that your friend just recommends someone, and they could be really good. Go and see them. But go and see someone else as well, and
Good
then
advice, isn't it?
and set them
And
off
it's a
against.
freebie. The
Yeah.
first, just to
Is
feel
it-
feel
I
each
didn't
other.
realise that. I actually didn't realise that. That it was actually all for free.
And do what I
Well, the
did with
first
my
one.
surgeon.
Yeah.
Do what I did with my surgeon. I said to the
Yes.
second surgeon, my
Yeah.
first surgeon said this. I know I don't agree with that. I think,
Of course.
here's the
Of
problem.
course, you're right.
Here's the problem. And why don't you agree with it? Pit them against each
Love
other
that.
and find out, start informing yourself. Remember, we talked about this in the first episode, the 100th episode,
Yeah.
your 100th
Yeah.
episode,
Love that.
which was
Yes,
amazing.
Yeah,
I
tune
was-
into that one.
Yeah,
that was a
I
really
was
good
super
one.
frightened
Yes,
coming
yeah.
in with the tiaras and the balloons and everything.
I
Anyway,
forgot about that.
We had a bit of
See, for
Hollywood
that was
going
normal.
there, didn't we?
I felt quite normal
so
in that.
and then there's also the Australian Financial Industry Awards, the IFPA, and they host awards to celebrate excellence in accounting, superannuation, and financial advice. So
okay,
there's
so
another
do
one.
your homework.
Yeah,
Okay,
so,
yeah. I
so
want
we've
them
given,
to on
we've
our
given
show
3
notes.
so far.
100%.
Yeah, we'll put these on the
Well,
show
yeah,
notes.
that's really
but,
good.
Yeah.
If you're
And-
concerned or worried, like what most of us are when it comes to finance,
Well,
And then
yeah.
reassure
Barron's,
yourself.
and then Barron's, BARRONS, and Morgan Stanley both put out the top 150 financial advisors list every year.
Wow.
So you've
That's
got
great.
and
That
then
is so
and you can
good.
sort that list into you can sort these lists into who's close to me. I don't the best guy's in Queensland, but I'm in Sydney. I don't want to travel to Queensland. Okay, so the third best guy or girl is actually in my suburb.
Got
I'm going
it.
to go and
Brilliant.
visit
I
them.
love this.
Yeah.
So there's a really simple way, and I've never heard anyone offer that suggestion about how you go and find someone
No.
that's good. But my suggestion would be, this isn't Roger Montgomery recommending anyone,
No.
although I do have a guy that I'll introduce you to who I think is really good, that I use, and I know a lot of people in my industry use him. But here's an independent way you can go and see every year that list is going to change. But also, here's another thing that's just occurred to me. Look at previous years' lists, and see who's always in the top 10 or the top
Oh,
20.
that is a
Right.
good one.
Who's
Some
there
of them
every
isn't it?
single year? Who's in there every single? So they're not flash in the pan overnight successes.
Wow, yeah.
They've been there every single year, tirelessly working for their clients, and working to give the best outcomes.
So you mentioned your industry just then. So let's just say that I've got a handle on.
Oh, yes, let's talk
where
about-
Well,
yeah.
no, I'm just because Liz, I was confused about this in our last episode.
yeah.
Remember, where we've worked out my financial status and what I have, what I don't have. Then I find I've got X amount, $1 or 100,000 or more, and I'm thinking, well, great. Do I put that under my bed?
Yeah.
Or do I invest it? Is that when I go to someone like you? I don't know. It's a minefield out there for me.
Yes.
Is that when I approach someone like you to say, I need to make money from this money to live
Okay,
on?
so we're a funds management firm.
And what's
So
that?
okay,
Yeah.
so what we do is a little bit different to what we've just talked about. So a financial advisor will look at your personal financial circumstances. They will then consider what's appropriate for you in terms of where to invest, but also how to structure your affairs to be tax efficient, for example.
Got it. Okay.
They'll also be thinking about your will, or they'll be thinking about what to do next with the money and what are your goals. So they'll look at your circumstances, they'll look at your desires and your needs, they'll also look at what your expectations are, and then you'll set some goals, and then they'll say, okay, well, our view is that this is the structure that you need, and then this is also the financial plan that we're going to put together for you. Part of that plan is your investments and how they're going to serve your goals. And then what they'll do is they'll have what's called an APL, or an approved product list. So then what they'll do is from that list, typically, they'll put together a portfolio for you. And we at Montgomery Investment Management, we have a bunch of fund managers and a bunch of who are managing different funds. And some of those will be on that approved product list, and they might recommend some of our funds to you. They might not. They might recommend other fund managers, and that's fine. But that's where we fit. Now, there are other people.
What's a fund manager? I know it sounds like money manager, get that, but can you break that down a little bit?
Yeah, sure. So, well, it's actually the fund manager that manages the money. The financial advisor or financial planner is structuring your affairs so in a tax efficient way, they can then allocate money to different asset classes. So what is an asset class? Well, there's property, there's fixed interest, there's shares, there's, all these other, all these things. There's alternatives and hedge funds and all this sort of stuff. Fund managers are working to manage portfolios of those individual assets. So they're actually the guys or girls who are dedicated to generating a return for you on parts of your portfolio that the financial advisor has said you need for your finances.
I gotcha. Okay.
100%.
Yeah.
And remember, go to the ones that have won awards, or go and talk to friends who've had a good experience. And, I think I might have said this before in a previous episode, but another Warren Buffett quote that I really love
those Warren Buffett
is,
quotes.
because he's done, he's 94 now, and he's one of the richest men in the world through investing in other businesses and through sharing his investing wisdom, which has just been a gold mine for everyone, really. But, a lot of people might never have even heard of him. And what he said is, Wall Street is the only industry where people who drive to work in a Rolls Royce get their advice from people who catch the subway.
Yeah.
That blows my mind
I know.
every time I hear that.
And so what I'm saying there, and what Warren Buffett was saying there, is find out who's been successful. Go to an advisor that has had some success for their clients. And that's where, some friends might be able to help. And I proposed, we were downstairs at the cafe, and I said, look, let me just ask you whether or not I can say this, and you've given me permission to say this. You are talking to a lot of women who are financially suffering, and it could be they're suffering because of financial coercion. It could be that they're suffering because they're the sandwich generation. They're stuck between wanting to support their kids and needing to help their parents, and they're not, they're really suffering financially. But you know what? You're talking to so many women. Why don't you set up a club? Why don't they set up a club? Why don't you why don't you reach out to each other and sit down and, it's going to be...
Back fences, we're here, and keep on writing in for that one because it's such a great thing. And, we're sort of saying with people...
even if it's online.
They're feeling...
Sure, it could just be online. You could set up a forum
getting
online.
Getting support in whatever area it is, and now we're sort of at this age and stage, and sort of feeling you do want to, you're sort of saying, we're givers, we've been brought up as people pleasers, and you get to this stage now as women, and then you're going in and you're trying to help your children to put some money on a place, and if you're living on your super, and so you're withdrawing from that, and then you're sort of thinking, well, what about me?
What about me?
What about me?
It isn't fair.
Moving pictures. We're showing our age again.
Come on,
By the way,
true. What about me?
It won't be true. Everyone will hear about it when it's a TikTok song.
When's this one been
You need to do a TikTok, and put moving pictures. You do a TikTok video, put moving pictures, what about me in there. It'll go
it's true
viral,
though, isn't
and then
it?
the younger generation will hear the song along,
Yeah.
and they'll love it too.
But you could
It's a
throw
great
it about
song.
finance and women today.
It's
Like, what about
relationships,
me?
it really is. a
Because you
thing.
can't help being nurturing and wanting to give and wanting to help. But at the end of the day, I've got to look after myself.
Yeah, so
And that's
lessons-
frightening.
yeah, but-
Yes.
You know, because I've got back to that
But
guilt.
create support networks. You know, there are heaps of
Hey,
people.
that's a good tip.
There are heaps of people.
Talk,
Look, and I
support.
always feel like I'm apologising. There'll be people who are listening who are just going to say, "No way. I'm not going to front up to a group and talk
Yeah.
about money
Yeah, fair
with
enough.
a bunch of random
Yeah.
people I don't know."
and you
That's
won't be
fine.
talking
No.
personally about your money. It'll be a general, like,
but-
how are you around it?
But
I'm
where
anxious.
do I go? You know, just ask questions,
Yeah.
just start conversations. If you're
Yes.
comfortable starting conversations, you could do it online. If
Yeah.
you want to remain anonymous, you could do it in person. If you prefer that personal gathering and get together, could start small in a cafe. You don't need me there. I'm not suggesting I be there, but just get together and start these conversations
And
and
yeah.
share what experiences you've had, and then there'll be someone else in the group who can share a solution.
Yeah.
Oh,
You know, which is
minimise the
great.
intensity
Yes.
Indeed.
too. I agree
Good,
with
good
that.
and bad, because remember
Yeah.
you're sort of saying about the barbecue and then someone's giving you advice or whatever, so you suppose you still have to be mindful, don't you,
Indeed.
of what people are saying, that, you know, it's...
But it's
eventually-
funny how women are often left out of the financial conversation. They have over the
Well, they
years.
have been, right?
And
Because-
it's historical, I know, but I really do
By the
believe
way,
it's still.
there's
still
a-
happening, isn't it?
and
well,
we
it
see
happened
it.
to me last
We
year.
see it, and again, not to denigrate men. There are women who have left the finances to men, and the men have done a crap job. You know, they haven't done a great job.
Yeah.
And you know, there are you can find these online, but there are lots of studies that show that women, for whatever reason, are actually really good at managing money. They can be a lot better than men at managing money. So, you know, I want to give you the confidence to step out and start examining solutions for yourself, because there are plenty of solutions out there, and you aren't unqualified. You've already got the biases and the ability to do a good job.
Oh, bravo. I feel that's another positive thing there. Like we always say, we're students of life, and I sort of think now, at my stage now, this is kind of a new area for me, and now it's great because I'm learning sort of stuff that I had no interest beforehand. All of a sudden I am, and I'm not alone that way, and it's not too late.
Be brave.
And it's great. It's a start. It's like in anything new, we're always about, it's good for you, good for your brain, good for so many
If you've
things
got
to learn
if
something
you've got
new.
if you've got a couple of hours spare, look, this is this is not helping any businesses. Go to the moneysmart.gov.au website. If you've got absolutely no knowledge at all of money, moneysmart.gov.au, start there.
Yeah.
You know, it's going to be unbiased, it's going to be very basic, but that's what a lot of people need. And you know,
Exactly.
and I'm not promoting anyone by suggesting
No.
you do that. There is an unbiased source of information that will help you get started.
Yeah.
I think
Oh,
by
that's-
educating yourself, ironically, will break down the anxiety around it, which I personally,
Which is what we're trying to do
Which I've
here.
personally been through. Quite honestly, this is my truth, is that I've had a real mental issue around, you know, divorcing and money and my future. It's funny, as I've been learning through you, Roger, honestly, you have initiated for me because I've listened and actually absorbed it, where before I used to, that would just wash off my brain.
it's
I
true.
wouldn't
Yeah.
want to know about it. I mean, I can run
La, la,
businesses.
la, la, la.
I love
You know,
people.
so,
I'm really great with people, and
Was.
I'm a great communicator.
Sure.
But that I was very fearful around it. And I know there's a lot of women listening that are in the same boat. We're rowing down that same damn river, right? But ultimately, I've learnt now I need to open my eyes, listen, educate yourself, and it's weird. I'm watching how my fear's breaking down,
Yeah.
and it's very healthy.
And one of the tips I can give from doing
Please,
this for a
we
long
want
time,
the Roger tips.
and there's so many, there are so many people in my industry who I know that are financially incredibly literate. And they're going to be thinking this is so basic, but what they don't realise is there's so many people who aren't, and they need this
Around financial
and this is one of the
education.
most basic things I can tell you. Don't make money decisions emotionally. Money doesn't care about your
a big
emotions.
one.
The financial markets don't care about your emotions. They're not going to respond to how you're feeling. And so it's really important to first get yourself into a position where you're not emotional, where you're at a point where you feel like you can step out confidently. And that's why I said in the first step and the second step, be patient. You don't have to rush into anything. You've got time. You know, don't make decisions emotionally about anything.
Pause.
You know, wait till you're in that headspace and that emotional state where you're comfortable and you're stable and you're confident. And then you can step out and start making some really wise decisions.
And then you're ready to absorb the information too. Otherwise, again, it's doing that.
You don't have to rush. You never.
No.
The markets are always going to be there. There will always be opportunities.
Such good advice and comforting advice. I just want to bring this up because a listener had written in just exactly on what you're saying there. I'm 62, divorced, have 3 amazing children with an inheritance. Most used to buy the house that I'm in. And then she said, your interview with Roger was perfect timing. As I was confused what I do I change my mind? And as I change my mind every week as to where I'd like to buy. And after the podcast, I felt that I could sit back and know the right thing to do will come to me, especially with the advice. I can take it in and walk, because she was listening to you on a walk. And then she actually wanted to know sort of who to contact. But she just said, thank you so much. And she said, for the advice to pause.
Isn't that lovely?
Yeah.
So
That's
that
great
was written
feedback
in
for
just
you,
when you're sort
Roger.
of saying that.
Thank you. It's very encouraging.
I think for everybody now, it
Makes
takes
me feel
the stress
good.
off. You know, you're even saying with the markets and Trump and the whole thing, everyone's worried and it's frenzy. You calm it all down. Calm the farm a bit.
Nicola, the bottom line is if someone is rushing you to make a decision, there could be a valid reason for that. There might be. It could be tax, you know, before June 30, whatever. There could be reasons to do that.
Yeah.
And it's important to take that information on, but then go and seek some independent advice and question it. You know, question it and test it.
Wow.
You know, it's one of the best things to do. Question and test everything. Don't just believe everything you're told. But as I've just said, there could be valid reasons to make decisions quickly.
Sure.
And I don't want to, by saying pause and wait, I don't want people to, you know, miss out on, you know, particular tax consequences or tax benefits by not making a decision quickly. But if someone's telling you to make a decision quickly, you have to test it. And you test it by going and getting another opinion on whether or not that's right. Yep.
And should we now also, with all this, you're saying don't be emotional. A lot of women are emotional, and like men are, you know, we are emotional people. And so it's one of those things too, is it the time to, you know, like you're saying, like the takeaways from today is, you know, you should, if you can, talk about it before. How do you take the emotion out, though, as well? Because it is, you know, everyone has different opinions about things. You know, what do you say for tips?
I just said that my anxiety's reduced from allowing myself to be more open and educated. So that's, funnily enough, had a profound effect on my anxiety around it.
Yeah.
Some people will know this
But that was
quote.
one side.
Tips,
The
you know,
longest-
you're a finance guy, people come, they're full of emotion.
I'm not
you
going to
know?
give you. I'm not actually going to give financial advice. It's more philosophical.
Yes. Life relationship advice.
The
is
longest
wonderful.
journey on earth is the one from your head to your heart.
Oh.
That is the longest journey, and it takes a while for your heart to be non-emotional. You need to stabilise your heart, right? It's nothing to do with money.
No.
It starts in your head and it journeys to your heart, and that takes time. So by informing yourself over time, that will help to settle the heart emotionally when it comes to money.
That's been my.
I rest my case. Education.
Honestly,
Education.
I feel better.
Yeah. Takes
Thank,
time.
thank you for saying that, and it's
Only Roger could finish on that bloody
filling our hearts that way, and we're sort of saying it's all about relationships. I certainly feel a lot better after listening to this. I've learnt a lot. But
Quite honestly,
so
I
with
feel
emotion, head to the heart. It's so true, Roger.
Because I leave these.
So much more.
I leave these eps worried that I've been, you know, mind-numbingly boring.
You're so
and
not at all.
I hope people got something out of it.
Can I just finish on what's one small step a woman can take today to feel more in control?
Wrap up, Roger. Tips.
One small step that women. Can you ask the question again?
What's one small step that a woman could take today to feel more in control?
A step towards their financial confidence and freedom is to ask who to go and see. Step out and ask. Just ask.
Wow.
Who do I go and see to help me with
As
this?
in,
Just ask the question, if you're willing to ask the question, then that's a step towards actually getting the answer. And you need answers before you can move forward.
Well, boom,
Okay,
I love
that was a great answer.
Thank you, because that's been really
Well
big.
done, Roger.
Also, for us to be proactive to us, because beforehand I didn't know who to ask, where to ask, what to even say about it, and now hopefully you're feeling a bit more confident. And write into us. Keep on. I'm loving the
we
questions.
love them.
Write in the feedback. We know Roger's going to be on again next month, and there's so many more things we want to talk about.
Yeah.
But everybody, thank you so much for listening, and don't forget to rate and review. Well, we've been getting some great ratings already, and feedback's
Nika was
been
just
coming
reading.
in
I don't
as
get.
well.
I haven't read them.
Yeah,
What is it?
they've been
Reviews.
Absolutely.
We're just reading it
makes
in the
money
cafe.
fun and makes
It's
it
wonderful.
interesting.
Thanks for your
and-
feedback,
yeah,
guys.
So,
It's
and
great.
keep it coming in, and keep it coming in with the questions, because there's so much more. And we can all relate to this, like this sandwich generation.
We'll break it
because
down.
we're
I love
into
that
it.
term, the sandwich
Yeah.
generation.
Can we get some feedback on what people need?
Yes.
Tell us what you need, because then it'd be great to do an episode on people's needs. Where are they at right now, and what's their specific issue, and let me try and help answer those questions.
Oh, wow. Okay, well, bravo. Well, thank you so
What a
much
great way
for
to
joining
finish.
us, and thank you everyone for
Thanks,
listening. We'll be in
Roger.
your
Yeah.
ears next month for
Look
this
forward
one.
to it already.